I neglected to get a bio for each of them. I'm going to ask that they introduce themselves, if you don't mind. Do we have anyone from the RCMP? Don't forget to unmute yourself if you're muted. You have to learn to wait to pause on these, these calls. Oftentimes it takes people a while. Okay, I don't think we do. Okay, and from Denman Island Fire Rescue.
How's that? Can you see me, George?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, my name's Don Luckett. I'm the fire chief on Denman Island.
Okay, excellent. And from Comox Valley Search and Rescue.
Good evening, I'm Paul Berry. I'm a search manager with Comox Valley Search and Rescue.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, and thanks again for participating this evening and offering to answer any questions our audience may have. Okay, let's begin the PowerPoint. I'm going to warn you right now that as the purpose of this presentation this evening is to review a 132-page document, this could get quite dry, but it's valuable information. All right, so here we go. Oops. Yes, okay. At the outset, I want to say that these guidelines are just that. They are guidelines. They're not regulatory. No agency has to follow what they suggest. They are simply a reference tool. All of the agencies involved during an evacuation will have their own protocols, their own policies, their own methods of communication, etc. But they may not be specific to evacuation, and it's unlikely that they will be specific to Denman Island, which these guidelines are. They have been developed with an all hazards approach, meaning they have been designed to be usable in a variety of evacuation situations. However, having said that, there are very few hazards that Denman might face that would result in an evacuation. The hazard that is most concerning for residents of Denman is a wildfire, and that was the primary hazard kept in mind when these were fashioned. I will be covering each section of the guidelines, but as there is not enough time to cover everything, we'll be focusing on the highlights. This is a public version, or sorry, well, you will be seeing the public version. There is also a confidential version. The only difference really is that the personal contact information was removed from the public version. And you can also see that the public version on the CVRD website. You can see the link on the screen there, the email address. Sorry, not email, the website address. Lastly, this is a living document and open to change. And as we discuss it and test it, we will identify areas that need to be added, deleted, or adjusted. Come on, where are we? All right, my hope this evening is that you will leave this presentation with a better understanding of the evacuation process, that you will have increased confidence in the ability of responders to help during an evacuation, that you'll have a better understanding of what you can do to help, and that you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Losing my mouse, sorry. Those of us in emergency management are famous for using acronyms, so I want to cover just a few of those that may come out tonight, and you can raise your hand, or if you hear something like an acronym that hasn't been explained. IC is the incident commander. This is the individual responsible for the management of all site-specific operations. ICP is the incident command post, which is the location from where the incident commander directs the site-level emergency response. The EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, is established to coordinate the overall response and support to an emergency. The CVRD's EOC is located in our new building on Harmston Avenue in Courtney and is built to withstand earthquakes. I want to say it's earthquake proof. It's like saying that Titanic was unsinkable, but I'm sure it'll do really well. EMBC, Emergency Management BC, is the province's lead coordinating agency for all emergency management activities. In support of EOCs, it may activate PREOCs, which are provincial regional emergency operations centers. And if further support is needed, it may also activate the Provincial Emergency Coordination Center, which we call a PEC. So we are not alone during an emergency or disaster. We have lots of support. And lastly, ESS, Emergency Support Services, is a provincial program delivered by local governments that meet the basic needs of those impacted by disasters by providing them short-term support such as food, clothing, and lodging. And you have your own little chapter of ESS on Denman Island. I just added this slide about 20 minutes ago, maybe half an hour ago. I was going through a dry run of this thing and I realized I was using terms like the EOC would do this or we would do that. And I realized it was important to let you know how the EOC functions. The EOC is made up of representatives from the local government, but it also includes many of the agencies that are working on the front lines, and just some of them are represented here on this slide. So there may be someone there representing the fire departments or BC Wildfire Service or BC Ferries or Search and Rescue, et cetera. They are each staying in touch with their counterparts in the field, relaying information back and forth. So if I say we or the EOC, it is a collective we, a true collaborative effort. All right, I said we were going to go section by section, title page. So these are pictures found on the cover of the guidelines. They were chosen to reflect two of the reasons why an evacuation of Denman may be required. One being a container ship fire, the smoke of which may be hazardous. And the other is a fire, which, as I mentioned, is a major concern for residents, particularly during the warmer months. They are operational guidelines, which means that they are meant to be used by first responders in the field and for training. And further down on this title page is this table, which identifies where most critical information can be found. All of the sections contain valuable information, but these are the areas most likely to be used during a response, and they are identified right at the beginning for quick access. And we'll talk more on each of these as we go through the presentation. Okay, I said I was going to go section by section, but if I cover section 8 first, much of the information in the other sections will make more sense. For the purposes of these guidelines, Denman Island has been divided into 7 evacuation zones. The maps section includes this map, as well as each individual zone by itself. The guidelines were distributed electronically and in binder form, but the maps section was designed to be printed in 11 by 17 format, which makes them easily readable, and they fit into the binder, which might be easier to pull out and review during an event. This is a section of Evacuation Zone 3. As you can see by the legend, each map includes an assortment of information that can be useful during an evacuation. On this map, you can see red lines, which are evacuation routes. Assembly points are the yellow dots. Reception centers are the orange dots. There's a boat ramp there, that's the green dot, and the wharf in red. And there's also a helicopter landing site noted with a blue dot. Not seen here, but found on other maps are possible marine landing sites. Come on, Moose. This image is also included in the maps section. It shows potential emergency parking locations near the Denman West Ferry Terminal, where excess traffic en route to the terminal may be directed. Buses, if available, would pick up evacuees at these locations and transport them to the ferry terminal. The purpose of emergency parking is to hopefully ease traffic congestion near the terminal. And there is a similar map for Gravelly Bay. It is Gravelly, right? Not Gravely, Gravelly Bay. Section 1. Okay, there are several pieces of legislation that allow for evacuations, such as the Fire Services Act, the Public Health Act, etc. But when a local authority needs to move people out of a community due to an emergency, such as a fire or flood, we find that power in the Emergency Program Act. Section 12 sub 1 of the EPA states that the head of a local authority, which currently is the board chair, Jesse Cutler, or designate is permitted to declare a state of local emergency. That state of local emergency gives the CVRD, the local government, access to 9 powers in the EPA, one of which is the ability to cause evacuations. Evacuations can be done in 3 ways. Self-evacuation is when individuals make the decision to evacuate, although there is no official evacuation order in place for their area. This can be especially helpful for residents with mobility challenges or other at-risk populations that may need more time. Then there are the tactical evacuations. These are those that are directed by fire or RCMP due to extreme risk or threat to public safety. No state of local emergency or evacuation order is required for tactical evacuations. For instance, in this picture, if the fire was moving rapidly towards these homes, it is unlikely there would be enough time to issue an evacuation order, so a tactical evacuation would be done. Oops, sorry. Lastly, there are the strategic evacuations, which are the ones primarily referenced in these guidelines. These are the planned evacuations that occur after the EOC is activated and a state of local emergency is declared. Evacuation alerts and orders are part of strategic evacuations and are often delivered door to door by members of the RCMP and or search and rescue. Three stages of an evacuation. Stage 1 is the evacuation alert. The alert informs a community at risk that an evacuation may be required and hopefully provides enough time to prepare to leave. It is at this stage or earlier that moving at-risk populations and livestock should be considered. In some instances, there is no time to issue an alert, which takes us to stage 2, the evacuation order. The order is used to evacuate all or part of an area. It is a formal document that orders the impacted population to evacuate immediately. It does not allow for discretion. And stage 3, the evacuation rescind. This is declared when the risk is low enough that people can begin to return. Although these guidelines focus on evacuations, an option for certain hazards is to shelter in place. It essentially entails directing residents to stay in the building they're in or to immediately find refuge in the closest safe building, then selecting a small interior room with few or no windows and remaining there until the threat has passed. Sheltering in place may give protection for hazards such as an earthquake, chemical or biological threat, or police incidents. There are a number of container ships and tankers that sail the strait. If a fire broke out on one of them and the smoke and fumes were drifting over Denman and Hornby, we may suggest sheltering in place rather than evacuating. These are some of the roles and responsibilities generally assigned to those at the site level and the site support level. I say generally because these events are constantly changing and they don't often play by the rules. Site level. As mentioned earlier, the incident commander is responsible for the management of all site-specific operations. In determining whether or not an alert or order needs to be issued, the IC, and on Hornby, this could be the fire chief, Don, will provide information and recommendations to the EOC, including the geographical boundaries of the area to be notified. The RCMP may be responsible for a number of aspects, including supporting delivery of the evacuation order, requesting support from search and rescue, maintaining security operations and enforcing the law, and staffing security checkpoints. The local authority, or EOC, site support level, is responsible for declaring a sole state of local emergency, preparing the evacuation alerts and orders, keeping the public, officials, and media informed, tracking and recording information, securing supplies and equipment, and tracking costs and resources. Again, these are just some of the roles and responsibilities. In the guidelines, we look at 3 different segments of the population. The general population refers to the majority of people, those that have little to no difficulty understanding what is required. Then there is the at-risk population, those that have different needs than the general public and may not be able to obtain or understand information or evacuate safely on their own. Teams going door to door during or delivering evacuation alerts and orders will look for those that require assistance. If help is required and there isn't anyone else to assist, the RCMP, Incident Command Post or EOC will be notified, and we would work on providing what is required. The alert or order will also have a phone number on it where people can call for assistance, assuming they're able to do so. The Hornby and Denman Community Healthcare Society was involved in the development of these guidelines, and they recognize the value of identifying at-risk individuals. In their home care program, they have clients on both Denman and Hornby that could be considered vulnerable. If appropriate during a crisis, the supervisor on duty will provide to first responders or the EOC details on where vulnerable clients may be located. As this information is private, the society will only share what they are legally able to provide or is reasonable under the circumstances. They may also be able to provide information on the location of vulnerable adults who are not their clients, such as the homeless. And we have persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities may face a variety of challenges when evacuating, depending on the nature of their disability and the situation. They may require assistance leaving a building or navigating over areas covered with debris. Alternate modes of transportation, such as lift-equipped vans and buses, may be required, and we would do what we could to make that happen. Again, it is preferable for those that need assistance to evacuate before being ordered. Providing for the transportation, care, and sheltering of pets and livestock is an important factor in evacuation planning. People do refuse to leave their homes if they fear for their livestock or cannot take their pets with them. Although the EOC will do what they can to assist with moving or carrying of animals during an evacuation, the care of people will always take priority. This is why it is so important for animal owners, but in particular livestock owners, to have a plan. When a fire is threatening the island, it is not the time to be asking, how am I going to protect my animals? This might mean having a means of transporting them off of the island before a large-scale evacuation, as well as a location to board them. Perhaps it means letting them loose like many ranchers did in the fires of 2017 and 2018. Or maybe it's putting out sprinklers on your pasture land. I would suggest you start by making your property fire smart, which you can begin with a call to Dawn, to your Denman Island Fire Department. The province may provide assistance to relocate livestock, but this is, I believe, limited to those who operate a farm business. I don't believe it refers to hobby farms. The CVRD does have areas that, if available, would support short-term shelter or containment of livestock and other animals. Isn't he cute? A few years ago, it was announced that airlines would begin allowing emotional support animals on their planes. It was assumed that this would mean a few more dogs or cats on flights, but people began to push the envelope, bringing aboard pigs, turkeys, even a miniature horse and a kangaroo. Although we encourage evacuees to take their pets, please do not push the envelope. If you have a menagerie that just has to evacuate with you, evacuate early. Although the EPA states that local authorities will make arrangements for the adequate care and protection of livestock and animals, The ultimate responsibility to move and lodge animals remains with the owner. The EOC will work with organizations such as the Ministry of Agriculture, the SPCA, the CDART, which is the Canadian Disaster Animal Response Team, I believe it is, ESS, and local veterinarians to assist where possible. Of course, qualified service animals are not considered household pets and must be allowed access to any location where the general public is allowed. I don't know if you can hear it, but my dog is having trouble
George.
making all kinds of gasping noises. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, George. Sorry to interrupt. I just had a comment that your voice seems to be adequate and then quietening down a little bit. So I don't know if it's just moving away from the microphone, but just to make you aware.
Okay, I'll try not to move. I'll try to keep it steady. Whoops. Okay. During an emergency, the incident commander, in consultation with the RCMP and the EOC, will select the best routes for evacuation from the hazardous area. It is important to note that the routes indicated on these maps may be deemed unsafe or inadequate at the time of an emergency, and a new route could be identified. If changes in the routes are made, the EOC and field personnel are notified. Fun fact, although the average vehicle capacity is 4 persons or more during an evacuation, 2 persons per vehicle is more likely. To reduce congestion on the roads and at the ferry terminal, we strongly encourage carpooling or use of buses. Depending on the circumstances, having access to a boat may also be a good option. Assembly points. At select locations in each evacuation zone, assembly points have been identified. Although most residents will use their own vehicles to evacuate, there are those that will not have a vehicle or will need assistance. These points are intended to provide a safe area to gather while either waiting for emergency personnel or to receive transport to a safer location, such as a reception center. There are 15 predetermined locations across Denman Island, and these are recommendations only. Whether they are used or not will be determined by the RCMP and/or incident commander based on a review of the existing risk. Do not assume that they will be used. Predetermined marine landing sites are identified on the maps as well. Typically, these are beaches deemed suitable to land sturdy boats. Because they are not defined by a specific address, they are not listed in the guidelines by location. Again, these are recommended sites only and may or may not be used. Reception centers. Locations have been pre-identified on Hornby Island as potential reception centers. They are intended to be a safe gathering place for people displaced from their homes as a result of an emergency or disaster. Here, folks may receive emergency support as well as information about the emergency. Depending on the need, ESS may be dispatched to these locations to register evacuees and provide referrals for those items I mentioned earlier, like accommodation, food, and clothing. The particular reception center to be activated will be determined by the EOC in consultation with the incident commander and/or other community stakeholders. These are the 4 locations identified as reception centers on Denman Island. Excuse me, the numbers correspond to the numbers on the maps. During an emergency, please do not respond to a reception center unless you've been directed to do so. The route to the reception center or the facility itself may not be safe, and it is very possible that a reception center may not be activated at all on the island if there's a large evacuation. It will totally depend on the need and if it is safe to do so. There are also approximately 18 other reception centers identified across the Comox Valley that we could activate. Communications. Oh, why is that red? Anyway, in this section, we are looking primarily at how we communicate with the public. Who do we need to communicate with? What is the message we want to communicate? And how are we going to deliver that message? In this section, we also touch on communication between those agencies involved in the field and the EOC. And as I mentioned earlier, we would hope to have representatives of each response agency in our EOC who would coordinate communication between the site and the city. Radio communications. Maintaining communications during an emergency or disaster is an absolute must. If for some reason we needed another communication channel between the island and the EOC, volunteers from the Comox Valley Emergency Radio Communications Team can be dispatched to wherever they are required, such as the incident command post, reception centers, assembly points, etc. Each member of that team has their own amateur radio equipment. Public and media communications. To ensure that everyone is getting the most up-to-date and accurate information, information officers within the EOC would be monitoring the situation and disseminating the most up-to-date verified information. They can utilize a number of sources to do this, including social media and the CVRD website. If a call center were activated, that center would also be kept current with the most up-to-date information. During emergency events, effective communication is key to ensuring public safety and confidence. We must provide accurate and up-to-date information through the most effective method possible. There are a number of means available to provide that information, and these are some of them. The size, scope, and urgency of the event will dictate which methods are used to notify the public. The evacuation checklist, and I'm going to turn this over to Don. You there, Don?
I am. Thank you very much. George, I want to thank you for all the work you've done on this, and to thank everybody else. There's been a large contingency on Denman Island that's put a lot of effort into this project, and I just want to thank them. And it's an important project, and it's come out really well. So thank you again. I apologize. I'm a little unstable right now with my internet, and it looks like my next door neighbor is out completely. So I'm just going to keep it just my voice, so you don't have to look at me. So there's a plus to this. So this is a sample of an evacuation checklist, which is basically designed for the incident commander in mind, and that would be myself or somebody else that would be designated as the commander on scene. Through this, you can see it's more of a prompt to the commander. These are not, we wouldn't go through and do each one of these. This slide you're seeing now is for the EOC. If we could just go back to the first one, to the red one. So at the site level, an incident commander would look at the incident itself and possibly conduct a life-saving tactical evacuation. Now, George told you basically what a tactical evacuation is, and it is, an explanation of that would be, it's something that is directed by the IC for an emergency that's either imminent or already has occurred. And that would be something like a wildfire or something along that lines. So have we done tactical evacuations before on Denman Island? Well, we actually have, and it's usually myself that would make the decision to do a tactical evacuation. And one of them, I think the first one we did was a propane leak in the downtown core of Denman Island. And at that time, I did a tactical evacuation. But the biggest one recently is the fire at Rogganique, just across from the community hall. And this was one for, we had an IC who was basically, that I left in command, that was controlling the operations of it. And in a situation like this, I took over the anything else other than operations. And I decided that, you know, when I arrived on scene, this was definitely something that could be beyond our means. And I ordered a tactical evacuation, which included the community school, the preschool, and the surrounding areas. So to accomplish this, I used our deputy chief and assigned a few members, and we went around and basically told all these institutions and homeowners, you know, what was happening and to please leave immediately. What happens at that stage? I advised fire dispatch that we're doing a tactical evacuation, and fire dispatch, the same as this sort of list that we have here, has prompts for me and would advise other people. They would advise the RCMP. The RCMP in that case immediately responded in force and then reported to me and then assisted me with the tactical evacuation. If there was any problems, they would support. So this is, you know, one of the great things we have, you know, the powers of the fire chief to do something like that. The second slide is basically, if you can just go to the next one, is basically, it's a sample of a checklist specifically for the EOC. There's 6 items on this one. And there's another, I think there's another 57 items on the list, which includes procedures for ESS and the return of evacuees. And those, once again, are just suggestions and prompts for everybody involved with that. Just while I have you, I just want to mention the Fire Smart program, which George alluded to. We're on day 2 of our Fire Smart chipping program. I'm going around with them tomorrow, above and beyonds on the island. If by any chance you had any woody debris out tomorrow that didn't get picked up, please send us an email at the fire hall and we'll arrange to look after it. And also we have a great wildfire preparedness guide that you can pick up at the fire hall. And it actually covers a lot of points that we're talking about tonight, including your grab and go bag, what basically the evacuation entails. Great piece of literature. So check out at the hall. It's in the red mailbox right beside the front door. Thank you very much, George, for this opportunity. And I ran over a little over time, but I'm back to you.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Don. Appreciate that. And this is the 8 pages of that checklist Don was talking about. So if you could just look at line 4 on, I'm just kidding. Just wanted you to know how big it was. Oh, and I also have to apologize. My wife passed me a note and she says, you've mentioned Hornby a few times instead of Denman. I'm doing a presentation. I'm doing this, you know, a very similar presentation on next Tuesday for Hornby. So I've been working on both presentations. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to turn this section over to Paul. You ready, Paul?
We are ready.
Okay.
So the door-to-door notifications would take place once a state of emergency has been declared, and once or shortly following the evacuation alert. These strategic evacuations take place usually under the authority of the RCMP, and in many communities around BC, the local SAR teams assist with the door-to-door notification, as they did in Williams Lake during the fires there. Denman Island has an evacuation kit pre-positioned at the fire hall, and those kits contain all of the information, all of the materials that are required. It may be that another agency, it may be the fire department, other volunteers that assist with the door-to-door notifications prior to police or SAR being able to be available in enough quantity to conduct the evacuation. But once it's been determined which area of the island would be evacuated, teams would go door to door. As they go to door to door, they complete a log, which should be the next page, I believe. The evacuation log is a very important document. It needs to be carefully and thoroughly completed. Every residence needs to be addressed on that log. And then once the log is completed, it is returned to the EOC so that we can confirm that every residence has been visited. You can see that the information that is contained on the document, everything from the name of the street, the house number, the family name, number of people in the house, and so on. And then as the teams move from building to building, we can go to the next slide, please. There is a common set of color coding which is utilized so that other responders can quickly and visually determine what the state of that particular residence is. And this is biodegradable flagging that is placed on each of the residences in a location that it can be easily seen from the street. So for longer driveways, it may need to be at the end of the driveway. For shorter driveways, smaller residential areas, it could be right on the house. So a blue ribbon, and these ribbons are about 2 feet long so that they can be seen. Blue means that there is no one home. Pink means that we've notified the residents there. And in addition to, we put the pink on the door handle, but we also leave them a yellow one so that when the actual evacuation order comes, they can switch their pink with a yellow. Yellow means that they have left the residence, the house is evacuated, or the residence is evacuated. Orange is utilized when responders, when the residents say that they will not leave the residence, and then red, or for those who need assistance. So it could be a physical handicap and they need assistance to be able to leave. But it's a very simple, straightforward process. Certainly all the SAR teams are familiar with it, and the fire departments are familiar with this process, as are the RCMP. Jordan, I think you might have an RCMP member on the call now.
Yeah, that's me. I'm sorry, I had a technical problems there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, my apologies. My apologies for that, for being late there. I'm at home and I have never done this type of thing from home before. So
Okay, not a problem. I have a section coming up, Aaron, on the RCMP role, and
great.
if you can just answer some questions at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I've reviewed all this stuff that you sent
Okay.
me, so it's perfect. Yeah, no, this is good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next we have transportation. The primary means of transportation during evacuation will be private vehicles. However, some residents may not have the ability to transport themselves and their families out of a hazard area. It is critical that other means of transportation are identified and then provided as needed. Buses, if necessary, local authority buses, school buses, private buses, whatever we can get our hands on, would be staged on Denman Island and then directed where needed. Those residents receiving evacuation alerts or orders need to be kept informed where buses will be so they can assemble there to obtain transportation. Two of our options in the Comox Valley, just two of them, not saying that's all that we have, but are Watson and Ash in Comox. They're contracted by BC Transit to provide services locally for municipal and regional bus transportation. They have access to an assortment of buses, including those that are handicapped accessible. They may choose to send new buses and drivers or divert buses that are already in operation, or both. For an emergency after hours, they estimate that they could have drivers and buses ready to roll from their yard within an hour of notification. Then there's First Student Canada in Courtenay. They have a 46-passenger school bus on Denman Island, as well as one on Hornby, and neither is handicapped accessible, unfortunately. In an emergency, they would provide us the contact information for their drivers. Marine transport, whoops. The use of marine transport may be an option in exceptional circumstances. Two possibilities are the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue and private boats as well. When I added this slide, I was kind of imagining a call for assistance going out across the district and seeing this huge flotilla of boats responding. Kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen it, the movie Dunkirk in 1940. You've seen it, great film. Okay, where are we? Helicopters. If needed, the EOC may request the support of helicopters to assist in various facets of the evacuation. This may include the 442 Transport and Rescue Squadron, the RCMP, or private contractors. We could also look at float planes. And lastly, BC Ferries. I need to say that although I have included a picture here of the Salish Orca, which is the ferry that runs between Little River and Powell River, it does not mean that it would be provided during an evacuation, but it is a possibility. BC Ferries, excuse me, has indicated that the terminal ramps and or berths at both Gravelly Bay and Shingle Spit are big enough to accommodate larger vessels. If a mass evacuation was required and it was believed that additional support from BC Ferries would be beneficial, the EOC would contact the PREOC, that's the Provincial Regional EOC, or in BC directly to request this resource. If necessary, access to the ferry terminals could be restricted to emergency resources and evacuees only. BC Ferries are not responsible for directing ferry traffic prior to entering onto BC Ferries property, which is why traffic control is so important. To increase pedestrian capacity, vehicle traffic on the ferry may be prohibited with certain exceptions, such as vehicles carrying those incapable of boarding by foot. Pets, such as dogs and cats that pose no risk to passengers, would be allowed. All animals should be leashed or caged. And there's also an Appendix D of the guidelines. There's a list of the local fleet and its capacity. Traffic control. Feel free to make any comments if you want, Aaron. Whoops.
George, can I just interrupt a quick sec?
Yeah.
Just one quick comment here. Just asking if you're aware that there are other buses on the islands rather than BC Transit and the school buses.
I probably am not aware of them. There might be other people on the island that are aware of them, and we can certainly add them to this document. That's not an issue at all. I know there's others on Hornby. I'm not familiar with the ones on Denman though.
Okay, thank you.
If somebody has that information and wants to pass it on to me, please feel free to do so, or you can pass it on to maybe Don, and he can pass it on to me. Also, I should mention that if you go to the CBRD website under emergency management, there is a way there to send us an email. So feel free to do that. When I say we, I mean myself and Howie Siemens. He's the emergency program coordinator. He's also listening in today. Okay, so traffic controls may be established at key intersections along the evacuation routes. In some cases, it may be necessary to control traffic or other routes to minimize the impact to the majority of evacuation traffic. In most cases, the RCMP will manage the checkpoints. However, during a large-scale event, police resources may become strained and non-police resources, such as security companies, may be required. Access control and security. As an area is being evacuated, access control points and barricades may be set up. The objectives of access control are: 1, to provide a controlled area from which an emergency evacuation can take place, to prevent entry to the evacuation area by unauthorized persons, 3, to protect lives by controlling entry into the evacuated areas. Excuse me. And 4, to maintain security and law and order within the evacuated area. Temporary access back into evacuated areas may be possible. The CVRD is the primary authority for approving or denying non-response related requests for temporary access. Choke points. A choke point is synonymous with a bottleneck in the transportation system. During a large-scale evacuation of Denman Island, the primary choke points will likely be the ferry terminals and the roadways leading into those terminals. The roadways must be kept free for evacuees and emergency vehicles, and vehicles arriving in the area of the ferry must be parked as efficiently as possible. If necessary, the pre-identified emergency parking locations may be used. This is a sample of the traffic control checklist, which was designed primarily for the RCMP and looks at the most efficient methods of controlling traffic and moving people off of the island. Like the evacuation checklist, it is not an instruction manual. It's just basic key information. It's a reference tool. There are 6 items on this slide, but there are a total of 42, and we can make additions or deletions as required. Oops. Sorry. There are 8 forms in this section covering a variety of topics. I won't show them all. The final page of this section also includes a list of the 15 predetermined assembly points for Denman Island, which may or may not be used depending on the need and risk. Re-entry and recovery. There will be a lot of public pressure to rescind evacuation orders as soon as possible. This needs to be carefully balanced against what services will be available and the risks that the community may face by returning too soon. It is not uncommon during large events requiring evacuations to activate an EOC's recovery unit shortly after the event begins. There can be a lot of different, in the EOC, there can be a lot of different sections, branches, and units. This is just one of them. One of this unit's goals is to identify short-term relief, such as restoring utilities and debris removal, to long-term actions that would include a recovery plan that contains items such as the recovery of all infrastructure, social and economic recovery, and public and mental health support. In areas where there has been considerable impact, it is not uncommon to open a one-stop recovery or resilience center to help connect residents with support programs offered by agencies like Red Cross, the Salvation Army, Mennonite Disaster Services, Insurance Bureau of Canada, and Disaster Psychosocial Services. This is a list of some of the resources we have available to us that will help guide us through the recovery phase. If you'd like to view them yourself, you can do an internet search for EMBC local emergency guidelines, and this should come to the top. It'll be the top result. And there you can find the links to all of these and several others as well. Whoops. Dwelling and population by zone. Section 9 includes an estimated number of dwellings and population according to zone. This information can be helpful in a number of ways, including determining the number of people that may be evacuated from a defined area. This in turn will help identify transportation needs, traffic control, and reception center and group lodging requirements. And lastly, good. I wanted to finish around 7:30. I think we're going to do it. Lastly, we have resources. Where's my? So Denman Island and area, in the resource list, there are, what's my dog again? In the resource list, there are 20 main headings, 32 subheadings, and 127 individual resources. This slide shows the 32 subheadings. It is a detailed list of resources that could be helpful to both first responders and the EOC. Many of them are generic, but many are also specific to Denman Island. And I would like to put a shout out to Gloria Mission and her Denman ESS team for providing much of the information on this list. Thanks, Gloria. Okay. This is a sample of the air transport section of the resource list. You can have a look at, like I say, this is just a small segment of that resource list. It's quite extensive. And we are done the guidelines. I just have some other things to cover first here before we move to questions. So moving forward, emergency plans and guidelines need to be tested, and the best way to do that is through exercises. And the experience gained during exercises is the best way to prepare for an actual emergency. With that in mind, we intend to hold a tabletop exercise for each island in 2021. And when I say we this time, I mean the emergency program, followed by a larger exercise in 2022. There will also be a full review of the guidelines in 2022 to ensure they are kept up to date. So an objective of this presentation was for you to know what you can do to help. So be fire smart. Through education and awareness, residents and communities can learn how to reduce their risk from an interface wildfire. Be prepared, excuse me. The emergency program encourages everyone to have an emergency kit as well as a go bag. There were numerous stories in 2017 and 2018 during the wildfires of people fleeing their homes with only what they had on their backs, literally. Do not assume that you will have enough time to pack something. Be prepared. You can get more information on the CVRD website by searching emergency preparedness, or you can just Google emergency preparedness and you'll get an abundance of information. Number 3, learn about the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program. Although you are next door to Vancouver Island, you are still a relatively remote community. The CVRD will do what we can to provide aid during a crisis, but your most immediate source of help will be yourself and your neighbors. NEP assists individuals and neighborhoods in getting prepared for a disaster and understanding how to cope if one were to happen. The Denman NEP coordinator is Eddie Johnston. I see she's on the call today. And I strongly encourage you to contact her for more information or to perhaps get involved in a great initiative. Her contact information is on the screen. Thank you very much, Eddie, for allowing us to post that. And number 4, sign up for emergency notifications. If you have not already, please register to receive local emergency notifications. You can choose to get notifications for a number of areas and municipalities, and you can choose to get them specifically for Denman and Hornby, which could be invaluable during an evacuation or other emergency. Notifications sent to you can be received on your cell phone via text or voice, and to your landline via voice. Just go to the CVRD website and search emergency notifications, or you can find the link to register under emergency management. Just a note, calls will come from you. If there was a call that went out, calls will come from a 778 number, which should be entered on your phones as something like emergency notifications, so you do not ignore them. This tip and the phone number, the actual phone number, is included on the website. So make sure you do that. And we're in the question phase. So I'm just going to exit the slide view here, if I can find it. End slideshow. Da-da-da-da. Stop share. Right here. Come on. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to leave time for questions. I didn't want to bog you down with too many details from that plan, although there was an awful lot. Do we have any questions, Selena?
I do. I have a couple here. Here's one of them is how will you identify and or deal with people living in substandard and or illegal dwellings?
Okay, well, I'll give you my opinion. If somebody else wants to chime in, feel free. The only thing I can say is what I heard from the Healthcare Society is that when they go out and they're dealing with their supporting their clients, they also come across people who are homeless, living in poor conditions. And they have indicated that, I haven't firmed this with them yet, but they have indicated that they would be willing to potentially develop a registry of people who might need assistance during an evacuation. So that's one source that we still need to explore. Anybody else want to chime in? No? Okay.
Okay, here's another one. Neighborhood coordinators have been given colored ribbons to distribute to neighborhood residents. How will these be helpful?
I would, and Paul, feel free to chime in on this, and or Scott or Mike. Yeah, I guess it would depend on what the colored ribbons are and how they're intended to be used. Do you want to mention that, Paul?
Yeah, that would be my question. Are they the same ribbons as with evacuation kits? If they're not, it could create some confusion. So it's a point of discussion going forward, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to be involved and have that discussion. And like Paul had gone over the evacuation log, and I think my main concern would be is if somebody's putting out ribbons, other first responders coming in later on might look at them and say, oh, search and rescue or the RCMP have been here already. They've already got all the information that we need to get, and we don't need to attend at these homes anymore. So, one would want to make sure that everybody's safe and taken care of.
Yeah, I would think it's important to have one system.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, another one. How do we get a copy of the evacuation map?
If you go online to the, I'm not going to bring back up the slide again. If you go to the CVRD website and you go to emergency management plans and guidelines, you'll find a full copy there of the public version of the Hornby and Denman evacuation guidelines, and you're welcome to download that. And it has all the maps in it.
Great, that's all I have so far on the chat.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to anybody online. If you if you don't want to use the chat feature, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question to any of our presenters, feel free. We still got 25 minutes here. I'm fine ending early. I just wanted to leave enough time for any questions that were out there. Does anybody want to make a comment?
Sorry, I just had 2 last-minute ones pop in here.
Okay.
Let's see. What is the relationship between the 7 zones shown in this new evacuation guideline and the 34 ESS neighborhoods Denman has had for years?
I don't know. I don't know if Eddie or Dawn, if you can comment on that. Or even Mike Fournier. I don't know, you were involved when these zones were initially laid out. I don't know if you have an idea. Gloria? Oh, you got to unmute yourself, Gloria.
So yes, we did use some of the neighborhood to make those zone, but they weren't exactly 100% like that. So they are different when I made them, but I don't know, they could have been changed now. But we tried to stick to the neighborhood type of zone.
Yeah, Mike's
Thanks, Mike.
right. The neighborhoods don't completely correspond to the zones. There were fewer neighborhoods to begin with, but it was recognized early on that the neighborhoods were too large and not necessarily a lot of people, but because of the nature of the island, mostly being rural, that it would have too far distance between properties. So they made smaller but more neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank you very much.
just to add to that, to what Gloria just said, when we looked at those zones, and this was really early in the planning, we looked at them geographically, and we looked at them, you know, in population density and that sort of thing, and it was basically an operational thing for us. You know, emergency response and the fire department, where we could say if we had to do an evacuation, it was a lot easier to look at it and say, let's evacuate zone 1, 2, and 3. And it wasn't necessarily anything in the past. And Mike, you were instrumental in, you know, looking at that too from the early discussions. So it was more operational at that point.
Okay, excellent. Anything else?
Hello, I'm Michael Taylor. I'm a seasonal visitor to Denman Island. Does it make sense to have a color that represents homes that are typically unoccupied during the non-summer season? Because the blue ribbon requires somebody to repeatedly go back to a property to see if the people are home. And in the case of a seasonal property, there will be nobody home.
Can you take that, Paul? You have a comment?
Neighborhood captain. It may be something, maybe something that we need to consider, or that the neighborhood captains can provide some information on as the process is happening, and you can just make sure you put the appropriate colored ribbon on right away after a check.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I also think that, you know, if the situation is serious enough that, you know, we're going out and doing alerts, and certainly an order, I don't think, you know, as the risk heightens, there's going to there will come a time when search and rescue will not be going door to door any further within those neighborhoods. Any other questions?
I've had some more pop up here.
Okay.
The main sound connector's reliability is suspect. Will BC Ferries maintain the old Denman West terminal ramp to allow other ferries to dock?
That is, I'm guessing, a question for BC Ferries, unless somebody knows the answer to that. And I'd be happy to follow up if somebody wants to go to our CVRD website and plunk that in there for me, and I can get back to you.
Okay, I have a couple more. Is the CVRD working conjunctively with the DINEP to have a coordinated plan for Denman? Is that Denman Island Neighborhood Protection? I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry, can you ask that question again?
Is the CVRD working conjunctively with the DINEP to have a coordinated plan for Denman?
Okay, so Joey, do you want to chime in on this? I'm thinking that the neighborhood emergency preparedness programs are specifically to prepare neighborhoods, to ensure that neighbors and communities work together and assist each other, support each other during an emergency or disaster. They are there to help people to prepare for instances when first responders are not able to help them out. So as far as having a direct connection to the EOC, I can't see that happening, especially since in a large event, we're getting more and more neighborhood emergency preparedness programs developing all the time. And there could be, dozens across the region. So, it's a huge bonus for us if people take the time to prepare for themselves and take the time to prepare their communities. Just doing that is a massive step. So, I appreciate that. I don't know if that answers the question properly or not.
So George, I can jump in on this one a little bit. So part of George's work plan as we move forward is to be a part of those Hornby Island neighborhood preparedness committees, so that we are working in collaboration with each other. But George, George has stated is correct. Their main purpose is to help us ensure that the communities are working on preparedness. They wouldn't have a connection directly to the EOC. What we would be doing, working with the first responders who will be coordinating at the site and providing us information of what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Any more, Selena?
Okay, I have one more. Do the ESS neighborhood coordinators with their walkie-talkies, etc., have no purpose in your evacuation planning?
The ESS neighborhood coordinators. Can you chime in on that, Gloria?
Sorry.
I'm just not
ESS
familiar with. Okay, go ahead.
The neighborhood coordinators are separate from ESS. From what I've read of the plan, the neighborhood coordinators could certainly have a purpose. They've been mentioned a couple of times. As George has said, one of the main roles is to be prepared as a neighborhood, as well as individually, and to support each other within the neighborhood in whatever way might be necessary. Maybe your driveway has been inundated with fallen trees or something. So the owner of the driveway might not have a chainsaw, but his next door neighbor does, as part of the neighborhood program. Could possibly help him that way. But as I say, I've seen the mention of the neighborhood coordinators in the plan.
Okay, I just heard that.
Certainly see there being a role.
Okay, I think the part of the question there was something to do with ESS and portable radios. So I thought perhaps your team may have portable radios.
Well, Eddie, as the organizer of the neighborhood coordinators, I believe she has gotten walkie-talkies for them.
Okay.
She got a grant and aid, but that wasn't part of the ESS function.
Okay. All right. And just let you know that on Hornby, their NEP program is doing the same thing, where they're looking at getting portable radios as well for their neighborhood captains. And it's not so that they can communicate with, first responders. Their communication channels are going to be jammed up as, without anybody else joining in. But the primary reason is for them on Hornby anyway, is to communicate with their neighborhood captains. Okay. Well,
With each
Howie,
other.
did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just going to add on. So I think what was discussed when we were way in the past when we first started the other version of these plans was if there was needing to do a quick reach out to communities to see if what their situation was for say if it was say an earthquake, because that's the only thing I can think of it at this time, and how it would impact Denman or Hornby. But we might reach out to the neighborhood coordinators to see how they're doing. But it's really the radio communications is about their team collecting information about who's safe in their neighborhood, and then seeing who needs help and the processes that they've done in their plan to do that. But in the second part of that is if the fire department is needing to understand who has the greatest needs when they're doing an assessment of the community, we might be reaching out to those coordinators for an update from that neighborhood. So that was in the plan, but it wasn't the first line of communications. It was really about their communities talking to each other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have one more. You've mentioned several times that this guidelines document is subject to revision. A number of seemingly important matters don't seem to have been covered. When shall we see a revision?
I'm just wondering what the seemingly important matters are. Again, if I'm just wondering if whoever had the question, if they could look at the document. Like I said, it's 132 pages, and not everything was covered in this presentation. But again, if there's, as we test this with the first response agencies this coming year, having those tabletop exercises and then the larger one after that. If there are shortcomings in this guidelines, if there are things that needed to be changed or added, we will certainly do that. And the guidelines are also, because of the chapters that they're, the different sections that they're divided into, if we need to make additions or deletions, changes right now, we can do that and just send those changes out to people. So it makes it really easy.
Okay, here's another one. What exactly is a tabletop exercise?
Okay, tabletop exercise. So it is February 2nd, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's not pick February, let's pick June. 6 o'clock in the afternoon, a campfire in a campground has gotten out of control. It's spreading northwest from the southeast corner of the island. It's out of the fire department has responded and has been unable to contain it. Let's chat. And that's basically what it is. It's presenting a scenario and having a conversation about how you would respond to that situation. And it can be whatever scenario you want, and it can be as difficult or as easy as you want to make it. Is to go through the processes, look at the guidelines, and ensure that if they are in the guidelines or in somebody's policies and whatnot, that those things are being followed. And if they aren't being followed, if they're not usable, then they need to be changed.
Just to follow up on that, tabletops are something that's done a lot in training with emergency personnel, with especially in the fire service. We use tabletop training, for example, in my emergency scene management course that I took years ago. We would have specific scenarios, and they would be presented to a group of people, and you would have to problem solve with these, and you would have to decide. And it was a way of making mistakes in an atmosphere that was comforting, and it was good, and it was a way to look at how to change things and how we would do it without actually having that event. So it's a tried and true method of us putting something out there and testing it. And then this is the way we would test this evacuation document.
All right, thanks, Don. Anything else, Selena?
No more questions on here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, one more came in. Where do we send our suggestions or comments to regarding this plan?
Okay, I would continue using the I forget what it's called. It's a way to deliver an email message to the emergency program, either Howie or myself, just by going to the CVRD website and going under emergency management. And you'll see a spot there where you can make comments. So I'd appreciate any feedback you have. We good?
And there's just a lot of thank you for your time.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for participating this evening. I want to thank Aaron, Paul, Don for helping out this evening. And thanks, Mike. And is Scott? I haven't seen Scott's name, but if he's here, thank you. And thank you very much, Selena, for helping out and facilitating this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
All right. And hope to hear from everybody soon. I hope this was helpful to everybody in learning how we respond to evacuations.
And
Right.
coming from the RCMP, I just want to again apologize for being late, but I look forward to continuing to move into the tabletops and all those, participating with the community and in working on this plan with you guys. It's very important to thank you. We'll chat later as well.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Aaron. All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.